The last time I visited my hometown was almost a year ago. That town, small and unimpressive, still carried the weight of every humiliating memory I tried to leave behind. But when my grandmother called and asked me to come for my cousin's engagement dinner, I didn't have it in me to say no. She was one of the few who'd ever treated me like I mattered. I took time off from work, unpaid, of course. My job in a tiny architecture firm barely kept me afloat, but it was mine, and I earned every cent with sweat and late nights. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back. Figured it was easier that way. No expectations, no drama, just a quiet weekend. Show my face, hug grandma, then disappear again. As the bus rolled through town, everything looked the same. The corner store with the rusted ice cream sign, the library I used as my safe haven during high school, even the stupid mural the town had painted on Main Street to inspire youth still faded, still laughable. I could already feel the air thick with the same judgmental stares, the same whispers about what happened to that girl. My parents' house was only 10 blocks from the station, but I took the long way. I didn't want to walk past it yet. That house wasn't home. Not since I turned 15 and realized I was nothing more than a prop in my sister's spotlight. Claire. The prodigy, the princess, the miracle child. 2 years younger, but always 10 steps ahead, at least in our parents' eyes. While I scraped together money from babysitting and tutoring just to afford second-hand sketchbooks, Claire had private art tutors and weekly classes at the city's best studio. She got her own studio space before her 16th birthday. I got told to keep the noise down when I was drawing in my room. Every family dinner, every holiday, every milestone, it was always about her. When she won an award, the whole family celebrated like it was the Olympics. When I graduated top 5 in my high school class, I got a "that's nice, sweetheart," before the conversation turned to Claire's upcoming gallery show. The day I left for college, no one offered to drive me. I hauled my own suitcase onto a Greyhound, sat in silence for 4 hours, and cried in the dorm bathroom when I arrived. I thought distance might make them realize what they had done. Spoiler alert, it didn't. After college, I didn't come home. I didn't even tell them when I landed my first job. The only person I kept in touch with was Grandma. She always sent me birthday cards with $20 bills tucked inside, even when I was well into my 20s. She called just to chat. She remembered things. She cared. So when she asked me to come for Claire's engagement dinner, I said yes, not for Claire, and definitely not for my parents. Just for Grandma. The dinner was at a rented event space downtown. Too fancy for a small-town engagement, but that was Claire. Her fiancé, Nathan, came from money. Old money. His family owned something that sounded important in the timber industry, and judging by the way Claire had been flaunting her new life online, she had no plans to stay grounded. I walked into the venue 10 minutes early. It was beautiful, of course, floral arrangements everywhere, gold trim on everything. I spotted Grandma near the dessert table, chatting with an older man in a corduroy blazer. When she saw me, her eyes lit up, and for a moment, the weight of being back home didn't feel so heavy. She pulled me into a hug and whispered, "You look tired, baby. Still working too hard?" "Always," I said, managing a smile. She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad you came." Then the spell broke. From behind us, my mother's voice cut through the music. "Well, look what the cat dragged in." I turned slowly, seeing both her and my father walking toward me. My mother looked the same, tight curls, tighter smile. My father gave me a nod like I was someone he vaguely recognized. I braced myself. "We weren't sure you'd make it," she said, clearly annoyed that I had. "Grandma invited me." Her lips twitched at the mention of Grandma, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she looked over my shoulder and lit up. "There's our girl." Claire made her grand entrance like she was stepping onto a movie set. Hair perfect, makeup flawless, designer dress hugging her frame. Nathan followed behind, tall, polished, wearing a suit that cost more than my rent. The moment Claire saw me, her expression shifted, just a flicker, like a glitch in her perfect persona. "Oh wow," she said, stepping forward. "Didn't expect you here." "I'm full of surprises," I said. She didn't laugh. The dinner went exactly how you'd expect. Toasts, speeches, Claire beaming like royalty. My parents gushed about how proud they were, how Claire was finally marrying into the kind of life she was meant for. I didn't say much, just nodded and smiled at the right moments. Grandma kept giving me little reassuring squeezes under the table. Then came the part that no one was prepared for. Just before dessert, Claire clinked her glass and stood up. "I know everyone's already heard this, but Nathan and I have some really exciting news." Everyone quieted down. "We've officially bought our first home together." It's a little fixer-upper in the countryside, but it's got amazing bones. And the best part, she smiled down at Nathan, then looked back at the crowd. We paid for it entirely ourselves. Every cent. Polite applause. A few cheers. Then my dad added, too loudly, well, not entirely. We did help a bit. Didn't we, sweetheart? Claire laughed and waved it off like he was being silly. But my mom added, you know, when family helps family, it just means more. The whole table chuckled politely. I didn't. My chest tightened, and I could feel something was off. My parents hadn't given me a dime since I was 17. Suddenly they were gifting Claire and Nathan enough money to buy property? After dinner, I stepped outside for air. The humidity clung to my skin, and I leaned against the side of the building, staring at the gravel lot. I pulled out my phone and opened my bank app. I'd been trying to save for a down payment on a rental apartment and had a modest savings account. I rarely touched it, but something made me check. Balance, $273.91. I blinked. That couldn't be right. I opened my transaction history. My heart began to pound as I scrolled. Withdrawal, $8,500. Wire transfer, labeled housing gift. Withdrawal, $2,000, engagement gift Claire. Withdrawal, $3,000, ring reimbursement. And more. All with my name. All with my account number. I hadn't authorized a single one. My blood ran cold. I turned to go back inside, already pulling up my banking security contacts. That's when I saw Claire through the window, laughing with my parents, holding her left hand up so everyone could see the ring, a massive diamond I hadn't noticed before. The caption she'd posted earlier that day on Instagram came back to me. He went all out for the ring, but he says I'm worth every penny. Only now I knew. It hadn't been Nathan who paid for that ring. It had been me. I didn't go back inside. My hands were trembling too hard to turn the doorknob anyway. Instead, I sat on the concrete steps near the back entrance, my phone glowing like a tiny siren in my palm. I refreshed the app. The numbers didn't change. 10,000, maybe more, gone. Not by accident. Not by some fraud to halfway around the world. No, this theft had a name. A familiar, comfortable, unforgivable name. I called the bank. It was a blur. The woman on the other end was calm, almost robotic, as I reported the transactions. She asked security questions. Verified my information. Put a temporary freeze on my account. Promised a fraud specialist would call me within 72 hours. I hung up, numb. The back door creaked open. Claire stepped out, hugging herself. She spotted me and tilted her head, a soft pout forming. You okay? You disappeared. I stared at her. You used my savings. She blinked. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Claire. My savings account. My money. Thousands of dollars, all labeled for you and Nathan. I just checked. She crossed her arms, clearly annoyed now. Why are you snooping around for drama? I didn't take anything from you. You didn't have to, I said, my voice rising. They did it for you. Her eyes narrowed. Excuse me. Our parents. They accessed my account. They had my login, probably from when I was in high school. I never changed it. They transferred money. Thousands. For you. For your ring. For your house. Something flickered behind her eyes. Not guilt. Fear. I didn't ask them to do that, she said, too quickly. But you didn't stop them. She hesitated. Look, they said they were helping. It's not like you were using the money. I stood. Are you serious? She backed up a step. You live in some tiny apartment. You wear the same clothes from college. You're always broke. Maybe they figured that I didn't deserve what I earned? I said, stepping forward. That's what this is, isn't it? I work. I save. I survive. So you and your perfect fiancé can play house on money I bled for. And you justify it by convincing yourself I wouldn't notice. She bristled. You always make everything about you. No, I said, voice sharp. You and our parents make everything about you. Every birthday, every holiday, every ounce of love and attention. And now? Now you're stealing money and pretending it's love. She sneered. It was just some money. You'll get over it. Those words, so casual, so condescending, landed like a slap. I didn't respond. I walked past her, back into the event hall, my heart hammering. Inside, music was playing and people were laughing. But when I approached my parents at the corner table, I saw them stiffen. My father looked up from his drink like I'd just ruined dessert. My mother gave me that tight-lipped smile she reserved for people she found exhausting. Why? I asked, low and sharp. Why did you take my money? They blinked, but it didn't take long for my mother to recover. We didn't take anything, she said. We borrowed. My laugh came out like a bark. Without asking me? Without telling me? You borrowed over 10 grand. My father cleared his throat. You weren't using it. In Claire's engagement, this is a big deal. We wanted to help. With my money. We were going to pay you back, my mother said. You always get so dramatic. It was for family. You never helped me, I snapped. Not once. Not for college. Not when I was sick. Not when my car broke down and I had to walk to work for 2 weeks. But this, Claire's party, Claire's house, Claire's damn ring, you drained my savings without a second thought. My mother's face hardened. You have no idea how hard it's been for us. Supporting 2 daughters. Stop. Just stop, I said. You didn't support me. You tolerated me. You used me. And now you've stolen from me. You always were ungrateful, my father muttered. I turned and left. Again. No one followed. When I got back to my tiny rented room that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, staring at the wall. My savings were gone. My trust shattered. But underneath the grief, something else had started to bloom, something colder, something sharper. I opened my laptop, searched for my account history, pulled every transaction from the last 6 months, cross-referenced every transfer, labeled every payment Claire had benefited from, labeled the ones that had nothing to do with her, random purchases, Amazon orders, transfers to names I didn't recognize. And then I saw it. An auto payment to a student loan account I'd never opened. That made no sense. I didn't owe anything on student loans anymore. I'd finally paid them off last year. I logged into my credit monitoring account. It had been months since I checked. And there it was. A new account opened in my name 5 months ago. A private student loan. $18,500. My stomach flipped. I clicked for details. The email used wasn't mine, but it was close. My middle initial was different. The address was my parents' house. The payment method? The same account number as the one my parents had access to. I looked closer. The money hadn't gone to a school. It had been dispersed directly to a student listed as Claire M. The last name was hers. The first name was mine. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had become me on paper. And suddenly, the stolen savings account didn't feel like the biggest betrayal anymore. They had stolen my identity. And Claire knew. She had used it. The morning after the engagement dinner, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My mind was racing through everything I'd discovered, every dollar taken, every lie, and that new student loan. They hadn't just emptied my savings. They built an entirely new life using my identity. I had no idea what to do next. I wasn't even sure who to trust. My mind kept returning to the same cold realization. My own family had systematically used me. They had played me for years, feeding off my hard work while I sat back and accepted the scraps they threw at me. They'd used me as a safety net, a cushion to keep their lives from falling apart, and all along, I had been too blinded by my twisted desire for their approval to see it. I couldn't keep letting this go. Not anymore. I spent hours going through my credit report, downloading every piece of information I could get my hands on. The new loan had been dispersed to Claire, paid directly into her account, not mine. How had they even gotten away with that? How had I been so careless to not notice it sooner? I felt a mix of rage and confusion, but I couldn't focus on that right now. What I needed was proof. I called my uncle, Dave, the one person in my family who had always been a steady hand in the chaos. He was an accountant, the kind of guy who knew everything about numbers and balances. He always had the patience to listen to me, even when no one else did. Uncle Dave, I said, my voice shaking a little. I need your help. I don't know what to do, but I just found out my parents have been using my identity for years. They've opened accounts, taken out loans. It's all over my credit report. He was silent for a long moment. I'm coming over. Don't do anything rash yet, okay? We'll figure this out. 15 minutes later, he knocked on my door, and I let him in. I was sitting on my bed, surrounded by folders and printed documents, proof that my parents, my own flesh and blood, had been manipulating me for years. I couldn't even look at them. Uncle Dave sat beside me and took a deep breath as he glanced through the papers I handed him. This is bad, he said quietly. They forged your signature on a loan application, and here, they took money from your account. I nodded, my stomach sinking deeper with every word he read. He paused when he reached the page about Claire's house and the ring, and his jaw tightened. Claire knew about this, I said, my voice cracking. She knew. She had to. She never said anything, but it's all over her credit report too. Dave nodded slowly, his expression darkening. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about fraud. This could destroy your parents. The weight of it hit me then. The magnitude of what had been done to me, by my parents and by Claire, was unfathomable. But what crushed me the most was realizing that, in a way, Claire was complicit. She didn't have to ask for it, but she had accepted it without question. She'd used my identity like a safety net, a way to build a life she never earned. I rubbed my eyes, feeling exhausted. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can do this. Go to the police? Press charges? What happens after that? Dave's expression softened. You don't have to make a decision right now, but you've got to be smart about this. There's a clear paper trail. If you want to press charges, we can do that. If you want to find a way to resolve this without the police, we can try that too. But you've got to take control of this situation. No more letting them control you. I felt a sharp pang of anger. He was right. For too long, I had allowed them to manipulate me. I had taken the back seat in my own life, convincing myself that it would all get better if I just worked hard enough. But they'd made sure that would never happen. Every time I made progress, they pulled me back down. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and meetings. Uncle Dave helped me sort through the paperwork. I filed a fraud alert with all the credit bureaus. I froze my accounts and started working with a lawyer to figure out the next steps. The weight of everything was suffocating, but at least I was doing something. Then came the call. I hadn't expected to hear from Claire. Not after everything that had happened. But when I saw her name pop up on my phone, I didn't hesitate to answer. Claire, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you want? There was a long pause. I didn't know, she said finally, her voice trembling. I swear to God, I didn't know. I laughed bitterly. You didn't know? You're lying. I didn't. I swear. Mom and Dad did all of this behind my back. They said it was a loan to help us get started, and I... Stop, I interrupted. You can't keep pretending like you weren't part of it. You knew what was happening. You knew, and you just sat there, letting them do whatever they wanted. You've been using my identity for months. I didn't ask for this, she pleaded. I didn't ask for the loan, for the money, for any of it. I just what? Lived off it. Used it to pay for your wedding and your house. I was screaming now, the anger I'd held inside for years finally spilling over. How dare you? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know how bad it was. You're sorry. I spat. You never even tried to stop them. You never questioned any of it. You just took what you were given, no questions asked. There was a long silence. Then, in a small voice, Claire said, I'll pay you back. I laughed, the sound hollow. You'll pay me back? With what? The money you stole from me. I'll make it right. I swear, she said desperately. I didn't respond. Instead, I ended the call and dropped my phone on the table. I wasn't sure what made me angrier. The fact that she thought she could buy my forgiveness or the realization that I had nothing left to give her. This was bigger than money now. This wasn't something I could fix with a conversation or a few $1,000s. What they had taken from me, my trust, my peace, my sense of security, it couldn't be replaced. Not by anyone. But I would fight back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to let them have the last word. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The days blurred into each other as I plunged deeper into my battle. At first, the weight of everything felt unbearable. This constant tension between wanting to scream, to make everyone understand, and the reality that nothing would bring back the life I thought I had. My parents' betrayal wasn't just about money. It was the years of their disregard, the subtle and not so subtle message that I didn't matter as much as Claire. I wasn't their daughter. I was an afterthought, a mistake they were stuck with. But now I was determined to fight, to reclaim what had been taken from me. The legal process was exhausting. I spent hours with Uncle Dave going over documents. Together, we built a case, one that was airtight. My parents had forged my signature on the student loan application, had opened multiple accounts in my name without my consent, and had drained my savings. I was ready to take them to court, ready to make sure they understood the cost of their actions, no matter how much they tried to downplay it. Claire tried to call me again the day after our conversation. I ignored the first call, but when she texted, I couldn't resist. Can we please talk? I've been thinking about everything. I don't want this to ruin our relationship. It wasn't just the words. It was the audacity. The tone, as if she was still entitled to a piece of my life, as if I owed her the space to fix things. I stared at the message, rage bubbling up inside me, but also, deep down, something else. Something softer. A trace of guilt. I was supposed to be the better person, right? Wasn't that what they always told me? Be the bigger person, Sarah. But no, not anymore. I was done. I couldn't keep making excuses for them, not for Claire, and especially not for my parents. I typed a response. You had a choice. You knew what they were doing. Don't contact me again. Then I blocked her number. It wasn't satisfying. It didn't feel like victory, but it was necessary. For the next couple of weeks, I focused on building my case and strengthening the fraud alerts. I hired a lawyer who specialized in identity theft, and we worked through the steps together. It was time-consuming and emotionally draining, but I couldn't back down now. Not after everything I'd learned. In the meantime, my parents continued their attempts at damage control. I got regular phone calls from my mother, each one more desperate than the last. She would start with apologies, always crying, saying how much she loved me and how sorry she was for the way things had turned out. And then, inevitably, she'd start making excuses. We didn't mean for things to get this far. It's all for Claire's future. We thought you wouldn't mind. It was the same script, over and over again. I couldn't believe it. How could they think I'd ever get over this? How could they think I would forgive them? I didn't take any of her calls. Not a single one. Instead, I focused on moving forward. And then came the email. It was from Claire, forwarded to me from an unknown address. The subject line read, "This is for you." I opened it hesitantly, already knowing I wouldn't like what I'd find. It was a screenshot of a wire transfer. A large one. $20,000. Under the memo, it said, "For Sarah's loan. Paid in full." I stared at the screen, confusion overtaking my anger for a moment. I read it again. Paid in full. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a message from Claire. "I've worked hard to pay you back. I never wanted this to happen, but I'm doing what I can to fix it. I hope you'll understand." The email wasn't just from Claire. It was also signed by my parents. My stomach twisted. So now they were trying to buy their way out of this. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was about quieting the storm I'd caused. They didn't care about the years of neglect or the identity theft. All they cared about was the money. The amount of money it would take to make everything go away. I stared at the email for what felt like hours. It was a test, no doubt about it. They were trying to make me choose between money and family. They thought that if they showed me they could fix things, I'd let them off the hook. They thought if they paid me back, I'd forgive them. But I didn't want their money. I didn't want any of it. I hit delete. But it wasn't enough. They crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let them think they could just erase everything with a transfer. Not after everything they had done. Not after the years of pushing me aside. I knew the next step would be more painful than anything I had done so far. I called my lawyer. "I need to move forward with the lawsuit," I told him. "And I need to make sure they don't get away with this." The lawyer was understanding, but I could feel the tension in his voice. "Are you sure? This is going to get ugly. They're your family." I didn't hesitate. "I'm sure. They don't get to walk away from this." The next few days were a blur of legal meetings, emails, and paperwork. I spent hours gathering more evidence. Every transaction, every document, every signed form, they were all connected. I wasn't just going after my parents. I was going after Claire too. She had known. She had benefited from this. She was just as guilty. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the principle. The principle that no one, family or not, had the right to take what was mine. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the email came. It was from my parents. It simply read, "We'll give you the money back. But please don't take this to court. We'll lose everything." I didn't respond. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't fighting for justice anymore. I wasn't even fighting for the money. I was fighting for myself. For the person I had lost while trying to keep a broken family together. And this time, I wasn't going to let them break me again. It took a week for everything to spiral into chaos. By the time I got the email from my parents, I had already set things into motion. It wasn't about the money, despite what they might think. It was about making them face the consequences for what they had done, what they had taken from me. I wasn't going to just let it slide. I wasn't going to keep playing the role of the good daughter, the one who silently accepted every betrayal. I had spent years trying to win their love and approval, hoping that one day they would see me as more than an inconvenience, as more than just the person who always got the short end of the stick. I had waited for them to change, to treat me like I mattered. But now I knew. They never would. Not unless I forced them to. The first major blow came when Uncle Dave called me, his voice tight with urgency. "Sarah," he said, "I've got something here you need to see." I paused, suddenly alert. What is it? Your parents have been trying to access your bank accounts. They've been sending requests to your bank for information, trying to see if they can get a copy of your latest statements. My heart sank. They were trying to find a way around the fraud I had reported, trying to manipulate the system again. My own parents were actively trying to undo everything I had done to protect myself. I knew then that this wasn't just about money. This was about power. They thought they could control me. Always had. And now they were desperate to get back what they felt was rightfully theirs. My obedience, my silence. Do you have proof? I asked, my voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and rage. I'm sending it to you now, Uncle Dave replied. They've already tried once with Claire's name on it. They're using her as the middleman. This has gone too far, Sarah. You need to make them stop. I sat down on the floor, staring at the phone screen, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had been trying to cover their tracks. They hadn't learned a damn thing. This was never about making things right. It was about protecting their reputation and maintaining control over me. They were willing to destroy everything to avoid facing the consequences. I knew I couldn't keep ignoring their manipulation. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure they never got away with it. Not this time. I clicked through the email from Uncle Dave, each attachment a dagger to my chest. The forms were right there, requests for account access under Claire's name, all signed by my parents, disguised as innocent inquiries. They were trying to make it look like they hadn't done anything wrong. I sat there, stunned for a few moments. My parents weren't just criminals, they were cowards. They knew they were wrong, and instead of owning up to it, they were trying to find a loophole, trying to manipulate their way out of what they had done. It was infuriating, but it also made one thing clear to me. I had to go further. I had to go all in. That's when the second twist hit me like a freight train. I had known about the forged student loan. I had known about the bank transactions. I had even known about the stolen truck. But I hadn't known this. I had received another call that morning. It wasn't from Claire, and it wasn't from my parents. It was from an investigator. He introduced himself as part of a team working on my case, and the tone in his voice immediately told me that things had gotten bigger than I could have imagined. Ms. Harris, he said, we've discovered that your parents were also involved in an insurance scam. We've found evidence that they staged the accident involving your truck last year in order to collect the payout from the insurance company. I froze. What? They've been pocketing the insurance money for months now, and they've been laundering it through several different accounts. We've already contacted the insurance company and placed a hold on the funds. We're gathering all the evidence we need to proceed with charges. I couldn't breathe. My truck hadn't just been stolen. It had been part of a much larger scheme, one that my parents had orchestrated for years. They had staged an accident, used my truck as a pawn in their fraud game, and thought they could get away with it. Are you sure? I asked, my voice hoarse. We're sure. We've got the paperwork, the claims, the photos. We've even found video footage showing the car crash being faked. I couldn't process what he was saying. My mind couldn't wrap around the fact that my parents had orchestrated such a complex web of lies. Not only had they stolen my identity and drained my bank account, they had been stealing my life, piece by piece, for years. When I hung up with the investigator, I was shaking. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. But it was also the moment I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had no choice but to follow through with this. There was no going back. I contacted my lawyer immediately and explained everything that had just unfolded. We discussed my options and agreed that it was time to escalate things further. I would be filing the lawsuit, and I would be pursuing charges for identity theft, fraud, and the insurance scam. I wouldn't let them destroy my life anymore. At that point, I wasn't just looking for restitution, I was looking for justice. For myself, for the truck that meant more to me than just a mode of transportation, and for every stolen moment they had taken from me. But the hardest part, the part one wasn't ready for, was yet to come. It came when I decided it was time to meet with them face to face. It was time for the final confrontation. I drove to my parents' house one last time. I knew what I had to do. When I walked in, they were sitting on the couch, watching some trashy TV show as if nothing had changed. They were still pretending, still acting like nothing was wrong. I stood in front of them, my heart racing, but my voice steady. I'm done, I said. This ends today. They didn't even look up at first. But then, they heard the coldness in my voice. You have two choices, I continued. You can either face the legal consequences of what you've done, or you can leave me alone. But understand this, you will never control me again." My father looked up, trying to maintain his calm facade, but I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. "We're sorry," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "We didn't know it would go this far. We were just trying to help Claire. Please, don't do this." "Help Claire?" I repeated, my tone dripping with disbelief. "You've been stealing from me for years, and now you want to play the victim?" They sat in stunned silence as I turned and walked out of the house, finally free. It was over. The game was over. I didn't look back as I walked away from their house. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. For years, I had let their actions define me. I had let their disregard, their lies, and their manipulation shape who I was. I had let their love, or the lack of it, be the thing I craved, even when it was toxic. But now I was done. I drove back to my apartment, the weight lifting off my shoulders with every mile. I knew there was still a lot of work ahead. The legal battles were just beginning, and I had no idea how long it would take for everything to be resolved. But for the first time in so long, I wasn't terrified of what would happen. I had fought for myself, and that made all the difference. 2 weeks later, things began to move quickly. The investigator who had called me confirmed everything. They had managed to seize the insurance funds my parents had illegally claimed from the staged accident. The charges for identity theft, fraud, and even the insurance scam began to pile up. My parents were facing serious legal consequences, and that was only the beginning. My lawyer worked tirelessly, gathering evidence and building the case against them. Claire, of course, tried to distance herself from everything, claiming she had no idea what was going on. I didn't believe her for a second. The truth was, she had known. She had been complicit in the whole thing, benefiting from every fraudulent dollar. But even as the case got more serious, I refused to engage with her. I had nothing left to say to her. Then came the phone call I had been expecting. It was from my father. "Sarah," he said, his voice strained. "We'll give you everything back. We'll pay for everything we've stolen from you. But please don't go through with this. Don't destroy us." I felt a cold, detached calm wash over me as I listened. It wasn't the first time they had begged me for forgiveness, but it was the first time they had tried to make it right. But the thing was, they had already destroyed everything. They had stolen my trust, my peace of mind, and the relationship we could have had. Nothing they offered now could change that. "Don't you see?" I said, the words flowing without hesitation. "You had your chance. I'm done." I hung up before he could respond. In the months that followed, things continued to unravel for my parents. The investigation revealed more fraud than anyone had expected. The forged signatures, the hidden accounts, the lies, they were all exposed. My mother and father both ended up facing criminal charges. They were forced to sell their house to pay restitution. The moment I had been waiting for, justice, was finally here. But the relief didn't come right away. It was more of a quiet understanding that the years of pain, the years of betrayal, were behind me. I was finally free from the weight they had put on me. The legal resolution took a while. My parents were placed on probation and forced to attend financial counseling. They also had to pay back everything they had stolen from me, plus the value of the truck. The restitution wasn't just the money they owed. It was their way of atoning for the years they had treated me as if I was nothing. As for Claire, she disappeared from my life. She reached out a few times, claiming she was sorry and asking for forgiveness. I didn't respond. I had nothing to say to her. And then came the real change. It had been nearly a year since the dust had settled. My life had shifted in ways I couldn't have imagined before. I had taken control of everything I had been forced to neglect. My career flourished. I moved to a new city, started fresh, and bought a new car, a Tesla Model 3. It felt like a victory, not just over my parents, but over the person I had been. One day, as I was driving down the highway, the familiar feeling of a full tank of gas, the clean smell of a brand new car, I realized that I had finally escaped their shadow. The weight that had once crushed me had lifted, and now I was living the life I had always dreamed of. My credit score? Back to the high 700s. I had worked hard to rebuild it, every step of the way. But it wasn't just about the material things, or the bank accounts, or the cars. It was about the internal shift that had happened. I had found peace. I had found freedom. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello, Sarah?" The voice on the other end was soft, hesitant. I didn't recognize it at first, but then it clicked. "Grandma," I said, my heart tightening. "What is it?" I just wanted to check in on you, honey, she said. I know things have been hard, but I'm so proud of you. You did the right thing. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I didn't know what to say. For so long, I had been trying to seek validation from the wrong people. People who had no interest in giving it to me. But Grandma, she was the only one who had ever truly seen me. The real me. Not the person my parents had tried to mold, but the person I was meant to be. Thank you, Grandma, I whispered. Thank you for always believing in me. We talked for a while longer, and when I hung up, something inside me clicked. I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was finally living it. And I wasn't going to let anyone, not even family, take that away from me again. The truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love. I had found something far more valuable, my own. And that was enough. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing could stop me now.